just leap in, if I may, and say, you know, you're obviously an expert on the nature, the essential nature of family business. Let's say that while family business has a high percentage of SMEs and enterprise level businesses in the country, isn't it rather a tricky model on which to build diversification of GDP, given that something like 70% of all value of family business will change hands within the next decade? Isn't that a rather precarious model to build diversification on?
Sure. So let me just backtrack a little bit. In terms of structure-wise, I'm right now in the second generation of the family business model. Our business was founded by my father, Manish, Hira, who founded the business in 1980. So in the GCC, what's happened in the past, obviously, oil was discovered in the 60s. Governments started spending in the 70s, attracted a lot of family businesses to set up here in the 70s and the 80s. Given that platform, we understand that now a lot of the businesses are also in the second generation of their businesses.
Very much so.
There's definitely a challenge now. What's going to happen, obviously, as we know through statistics, that only about 10 to 12% of second generation businesses actually follow through to third generation.
Yep.
And this is going to be obviously a very challenging model to overcome over here, like in any other place in the world, to get through to the third generation. And of course, there will be a lot of businesses that will not make it and a few that would. But given the same time that it is a newer economy, the GCC has a lot of opportunity still for a lot of new businesses to come in. And you saw earlier on, a lot of people over here raise their hands as a first generation business. So given that this is a newer environment, and there's still a lot of scope for a lot of new businesses over here, there's definitely, there's some challenges for second generation businesses or third generation businesses to follow through. And there's a lot of opportunity at the same time for new business models in place.
So what is the model that you have in place? Because it seems to me that, you know, looking at the discussion so far, your business strategy has quite deliberately ticked many of those boxes.
Sure.
You took the decision to diversify, you took the decision to put very strong succession mechanisms in place. Can you tell us the story? Can you talk us through that process a little bit?
So, you know, fortunately, I mean, it's definitely a fact that it's usually a struggle for the second generation to take over from the first. You always have the different points of view, the struggles and opinions, and you know, unfortunately, in our structure, in our system, my father gave us a free hand. He gave the second generation a free hand in 2003 to go ahead and run the business and make your own strategic decisions from henceforth. And what we did in terms of a vision and value creation in terms of our business, the business model in the first generation that worked very well was set up to be a distribution business model. By the time me and my brother, as co-CEOs currently who run the company, came in, we sort of analyzed on a macro level, where do we follow in this value chain? A lot of times, well, you must have heard earlier today, somebody just asked, are your gross profits declining? Is competition increasing? And obviously these were the places where we were at in 2002 and 3, where we decided in the distribution value chain, we no longer saw a big future down the line. So the change in the vision and strategy came in where we wanted to backward integrate further, take the existing lines where we were into, and start progressing more towards a manufacturing-based company. Today, we're completely a manufacturing-based company. We don't have any distribution model in place. We don't distribute products that are manufactured by other principals. And so that was sort of the vision change, the change of the second generation.
So sorry to rudely leap in, but what occurs to me, like that's the absolute opposite of your competitors, isn't it? Because your competitors very much are distributors first and foremost. They carry an inventory and they're distributors. You've completely inverted your industry model.
Yeah, I mean, look, from the way we visioned it down, well, in 2002, was that look, the world's getting smaller. The access for a lot of our customers to access different principles is getting easier. So we didn't really see much of a future in let's say, continuing in the distribution model.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, I can't speak for my competitors. They have their own strategies in place, and a lot of them today when we see them on a local platform, we're not really actually competing with them anymore. They're actually, in a lot of ways, our customers as well.
Yes.
So actually, we end up as a small family company now, end up being the underdog and actually being in a competition level with a lot of global manufacturers, with a lot of MNCs who are not family-owned companies.
Because, we heard a very eloquent presentation by Reg Athwal a few minutes ago, but something that occurred to me there is that he is talking very much about what I would call an established traditional family business model, rather than the model of a family business which takes concepts like borrowing, acquisition, sales as key dynamics that might take it beyond the family forever. And you seem to me to be an example of a company, forgive me if I'm wrong, you seem to me to be an example of a company that's put growth and market dominance above pure family interests.
Yeah, so I mean, in let's say the structure that we're in as co-CEOs, what really helps us is between myself and my brother who manage the business, there is a lot of alignment in let's say the vision that we would like to fulfill as a strategy for the business. Initially, when we were a purely UAE top-end based company up to about 2006 or 7, the level of growth, the foundation of growth that we decided strategically was in 2006 to go more regional growth.
Yeah.
So go into Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman. From 2006 all the way up to 2012-13, that's been driving the growth for the organizations. Henceforward, again, having similar alignments of growth is basically manufacturing, increasing product range, and going to different external markets. At the moment, right now, we've put in a strategy in place. By 2020, a certain percentage of our top line will have to come from international growth, not just growth in the Middle East. So the growth path for us obviously was creating a small manufacturing hub in UAE, then growing regionally, and now the focus is to grow internationally. So at the moment, we have expanded into markets in India, in Australia, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, and soon by the end of this year it will be the US.
And what percentage of people, say, on the operational front line in terms of decision making in that growth process are actually family members?
Well, we have over 1,000 employees now.
Yep.
Family members at the moment currently who manage the business is just myself and my brother. There's a management team in place.
Yep.
That are very key and detrimental to fulfill the vision and the growth.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me just clarify here. It seems to me, Manish, that you see the priority here not as an emphasis on the family element, but on the business element.
That's true. For us, we're focusing a lot more on the business, on the growth of the business. Again, the alignment of vision is that we will keep on investing in the growth of the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me be terribly nosy, if I may, here. And can I inquire about the financial models, the borrowing models, the debt models that you're using to finance growth with? Because I suspect there's a kind of urban myth here about finance and borrowing and family business, whereby, there is this idea that lenders maybe see family business as a longer term lending model with cheaper capital costs and so on and so on. I suspect that's probably not true. What do you think?
Well, I mean, lending, it all depends on how well you manage your books, how transparent you are with the people who you are borrowing from. I think transparency in financials are very key.
Yeah.
And it's all about the healthier your balance sheet, the more you focus on it. That means the more equity you keep on your books, the easier you're going to get access to that finance out there in the real world. And it is over time, obviously, that you can get access to more and more finance. And as you grow your company, and as much as you keep your retained earnings, as much as you can keep your retained earnings as much as possible in the business.
Are you using the same growth model for your international expansion as you did for local and regional?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. In the international business, we have a simple policy that debt to equity ratio shouldn't go above a certain amount, and try not to leverage too much.
We heard earlier from Professor Parimal Merchant about the whole idea of creating exponential growth. Well, I wouldn't say that you've created exponential growth, but you've certainly created almost world-class growth. Almost world-class growth. Yeah. So within that, how did you set about the task of capacity building? When you were still an SME, when you were still an enterprise level business, how did you capacity build and increase the performance ratios and the capabilities within a relatively small business to make that transition?
I mean, when we invested in 2003 into manufacturing, I mean, I still have the machine in our factory. It was a fairly simple, inexpensive machine.
Yeah.
Fortunately, what happened, being into the supply chain, into the construction market, we were definitely at the right place at the right time. 2002 freehold laws were announced. 2003 onwards, there was a massive construction boom. It came to a point where between 2003 and all the way up to 2008 and 9, irrespective of how much you increased your production capacities, you would not be able to keep up with the growth of UAE in terms of the construction levels that were happening in the UAE. So it was a great place to be. It still is a great place to be in that perspective of being in the construction and supply end as a manufacturer in that model. So being at the right place, right time did definitely help fulfill capacities. And as I said, 2006 and 7, to sort of grow up those capacities further, we had to spread our wings further and get into more regional markets like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait. That helped, again, another growth phase of adding more capacity down the line.
Such an interesting process. You know, I think you've done this extremely well. Tell us a little bit about the culture, the internal culture at Hira Industries, because, you know, you've created, for want of a better word, you created a famous brand. The question is, what's it like to work there? You know, because, for instance, let's take an extreme example of Singapore Airlines, you know, which is a world-class, world-famous brand, the world #1 in customer service. But everybody knows, and I'll probably be sued by Singapore Airlines now, but everybody knows it's not always the greatest place in the world to work, but wow, you work there, you're going to learn big time about customer service. So what's the culture of Hira Industries?
So the culture that we follow is obviously people are detrimentally key and very important to the business. It's not about putting in a beautiful shiny plant and machinery that can churn out revenue for the company. I've seen factories that are highly capexed, great to walk into, but because of poor management have not succeeded and failed. So it's more about the people rather than the infrastructure that you're trying to build and cater to. Within our organization, what we're always trying to do is to manage the growth, is build leaders within the organization. It's not easy. It's one of the biggest challenges we do have, because if you're a fast-growing company, you need to churn out great internal leaders constantly. And because if you're trying to go and invest in external markets, you need to have a lot of strong leaders within your organization to help you grow. We try to create a very, very strong educational platform by obviously trying to listen to the key management team, the people down the line, and understand what their weaknesses are. So I'll give you an example. One of the key management teams people, he's from an operational background. He's going to be managing P&L very shortly. So he had opted for a course to go to in London Business School for like about a week, just to understand on how to deliver shareholder value into the business. So you have to invest in your people. You have to help them grow and become better leaders.
And also, within looking at the business internally, at what stage did you adopt proper corporate governance, firewalls? At what stage did you feel secure enough to start sharing, you know, if not 100%, 98% of the financial data with people from outside the family? When did those key transitions click into place, Manish?
I think as soon as you decide that you have a well-trusted management team, and you know, you can't hide data. If people wanna take something from you, from your organization, they can, irrespective of whatever firewalls you build, irrespective of how much you put their hands down. If they want to take some data and share it with somebody else, they can do that at any point of time. I think trust is very important within an organization. Um, we came into a point that we figured out that if we don't trust our staff, there's no way we can grow. If we don't be transparent with them, there's no way we can grow. We can't expect people to manage balance sheets, P&L statements, be accountable for their actions without giving them the freedom of, the freedom to do so.
Yeah.
So you have to be transparent. You will obviously have a few bad experiences by doing so, but I think the positives are a lot larger than the negatives in the end goal.
So let's look at something which isn't very often discussed here in the region, the acquisition path. I can think of 3 or 4 of your competitors that you might be potentially 1 or 2 years from now in a very strong position to make a very attractive offer for.
Sure.
Are you interested in going on the acquisition trail?
This is actually exactly what we're doing right now. We are already analyzing internally about 3 to 4 companies within the Middle East and also externally, purely for acquisition growth. There comes a point where especially when you're trying to diversify in different countries, it might take you decades if you do an organic growth, a greenfield project.
Absolutely.
But an acquisition can help you leapfrog into the market share a lot faster.
Yeah.
So of course that is definitely what we're doing at the moment, specifically on the international end, where growing on a greenfield platform is a much more harder process.
Yeah. Very interesting. So again, I'm just being devil's advocate, but I put it to you that would take it, again, one step further away from being a priori a family business.
Sure. The way we're trying to prepare ourselves, specifically, let's say for the 3rd generation, we're approximately, let's say, 12 to 15 years away from a 3rd generation probably stepping into the business. Of course, there is a lot of succession planning. There's a family constitution that's being made at the moment. And how we are trying to vision ourselves down the line is to have a purely management-based run company and have the family only optional if they would like to join in the 3rd business. We're looking at the business to be an income resource for the family rather than a platform where they must come back to work.
Absolutely.
Because if we focus on a 3rd generation purely on coming back to work at the business levels that we're at, and if they're not interested, then we're in a problem.
So you've almost created a constitutional document to that effect.
That's right. Well, it's still being done. So
yeah. Interesting. So let's look a little way into the future. What do you see as your priorities within the next 2 to 3 years? How are you going to expand? Obviously, you've mentioned the acquisition path. Will you diversify any further into new areas, a little bit outside your safety zone of expertise? What do you think?
I think in generations, change is important. As I said before, we were purely a distribution model business for about 25 years almost, and we've changed that into a manufacturing business that works for us today. And obviously in the 3rd generation of business, things are changing very rapidly. For us at the moment, we are only looking at businesses that could only be added as another synergy that's there to the existing business. We're not trying to change our business model from being a construction supply company to an F&B company or a robotics company at the moment just yet. But I do understand, look, the 3rd generation that will come in, at least in our perspective, will have different ideas. There are already new platforms of businesses that are out there.
Yep.
The difference is what I find is that they might not have the same vision of having a long-term business. I think things are changing now. The new business model is they have an exit policy before they're even starting their business.
Absolutely.
So
it's very true. I'd always think, so sorry to interrupt, I think of a wonderful quote by Tom Peters that said, he said, so what if a business only lasts 2 years? Maybe it was a very good business for 2 years.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth in that.
So there's a lot of different paths then when you're talking about a legacy family business that has to have longevity in place versus the new school of model of business where I want to get in and get out for 5 years, and that's how my business is created. So that is definitely going to be very challenging because it is a new platform of business.
So tell us about the essential ingredients, the essential recipe for success. If we look at the Fortune 500, 3 of the largest 10 companies in the world are family businesses, Walmart, Novartis, Roche. Do you believe that, and they're all utterly different organizations in different countries, no obvious similarities between those three to start with, but do you believe that there is an essential characteristic that puts a family business on the road to success?
I think it's family business. Every one of them have their own individual recipe for success. It's very hard to define and put it on a roadmap saying that, look, these are your 3 risks. You've got personal conflict, succession, non-succession planning, non-governance. But every family is so different, and how they succeed internally. For me, from my personal perspective, what has worked and what I believe will work, at least for us, is for sure alignment and vision, which has already helped us grow.
Yep.
It's easier when it's siblings. It might be tougher when it's cousins in the business. And more importantly is the trust and transparency. So if you have trust amongst the family and you're very transparent with them, I think reaching longevity challenges will be easier.
Well, Manish, whatever your recipe for success is, we'd all like to have some of it, please. And it's been an honor speaking to you. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a huge round of applause for Manish Hira.
Thank you very much, Paul.